about it today back another video. Alright, my tennis fans all around the world, let's continue with this generation topic. And this video will be about who is the best tennis generation of all time when we look at when we look back in time and when we look at this time. If you look at the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, who is, I've not looked backwards more than so, I've not looked the 50s, the 40s, it's too long time ago, but I've looked up the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And what I'm talking about is players born in this century, on these years, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and who is the best generation in tennis history. And you guys know it. It is not any rocket science who is the best tennis generation of all time, because we know who is the worst tennis generation of all time. I'm going to talk about that a little later in the video. Let's talk about who is the best tennis generation of all time. And it is not any secret. You know it by now. But what I'm going to reveal here is some numbers that are just unbelievable, impeccable. And first of all, I'm going to reveal who is the best tennis generation of all time. It is, of course, the players that are born in the 80s. Of course, that is the golden tennis generation. That is the best tennis generation that we have ever seen. And of course, it is mostly because of the big three, Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, because all these three players are born in the 80s. So, this is the biggest reason why the 80s is the biggest tennis generation of all time. 82.5% of the reason that is. And you'll say to yourself, what do you talk about, Inter? I will tell you what I'm talking about. The players that are born in the 80s has won 80 Grand Slam titles together. 80 Grand Slam titles together! That is something that we have never heard before that has happened. 80 Grand Slam titles together. And of course, majority of those Grand Slam titles has been won from the big three, the three greatest tennis players of all time. That's why we as a spectators, we as a tennis lovers are so fortunate to be part of this golden era. And all three of them has played at the same time. First Federer came around, then Nadal came around, and then Djokovic came around, and we got the big three all together at the same time. They together have won 66 Grand Slam titles. 66 out of 80 Grand Slam titles that the players that are born in the 80s, 66 of them have Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal won. Djokovic 24, Nadal 22, Federer 20. That makes it to 66 together. And that makes it to 82.5% they have won of the majors of the players that are born in the 80s. 82.5%. So it is a huge dominance, The other players have won only 14 together. And which are the other players? It is, of course, Stan Wawrinka, Andy Murray, Del Potro, Cilic, Hewitt, Roddick, Safin, Juan Martín Del Potro. I'm sorry, Juan Carlos Ferrero. There you have the other 8 players. So 11 players won 80 Grand Slam titles together from the players that are born in the 80s. 11 players, because I just mentioned these 8 that won 14 together. Then we have 3 that won 66 together, which are, of course, Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. So, there you have it. What makes this so interesting is that if you look at the time span here, all right, the first player that won a Grand Slam title that are born in the 80s is Marat Safin, 24 years ago, back in 2000, when Marat Safin was 20 years old and defeated one of the greatest tennis players of all time, Pistol Pete Sampras, and that in that US Open 2000. That was the first player from the 80s that won a Grand Slam title. And then, if you look, who is the player last time who won a Grand Slam title? Who did it last? The last player who won a Grand Slam title that is born in the 80s is, of course, Novak Djokovic, last year at US Open 2023. So if you look at the time span here, Marat Safin, the first one to do it back in 2000, Novak Djokovic, the last player to do it back in 2023, 2023 or 2023, it is 23 years of an age gap here. 23 years, a time span here. 23 years. Unbelievable. It is unbelievable. It is so impressive. Unbelievable stuff. 23 freaking years. Alright? You know that Nadal and Federer, they have retired. Nadal is not retired yet, but he will retire later this month. Okay? At Davis Cup. So it is only Djokovic left from the 80s who has, of course, Djokovic can, of course, win one more major. It is not impossible if he does it, but Djokovic is the only player left who can do it. He can do it. No other player born in the 80s have a chance to do it. All right? Some are still playing, like Wawrinka, Cilic, to mention some, but we all know that those dudes will never, ever be even close to win any major. Djokovic is still very competitive, so he can still win one more in his career. Personally, I don't believe he will do it. I've done a video about that. You can check it out. I did a video about that 5-6 months ago. But let's see if he proves me wrong or not. Anyway, the best tennis generation of all time is players that are born in the 80s. All right. If you compare what came up after them, just because after 80s, what comes? Comes the 90s. We had the best tennis generation of all time, players that are born in the 80s, mostly because of the big three, of course. Like I just demonstrated in this video, they won 82.5% of the majors that are born in the 80s, which is an unbelievable, huge dominance. After 80s, we had the 90s, the players that are born in the 90s. That is the worst tennis generation of all time. That is the worst tennis generation of all time. If we have players that are born in the 80s winning 80 Grand Slam titles together, then we got the worst tennis generation of all time that won only 2 Grand Slam titles together. You can see the contrast here? The greatest tennis generation of all time, then we got just immediately after that, the worst tennis generation of all time, players that are born in the 90s that only won 2 Grand Slam titles together to this day. They are, of course, much younger than players that are born in the 80s. The players that are born in the 80s are more or less finished, all of them, besides Djokovic, who are still not finished yet. He's almost finished, but not finished quite yet. Players that are born in the 90s, they are younger, obviously, so they are not finished yet, but I'm doubting that we will see many players that will win Grand Slam titles that are born in the 90s. till this day, they have been able to win only 2 together, which is of course Dominic Thiem when he won his first and only Grand Slam title back in 2020 US Open, and Daniil Medvedev when he won his only Grand Slam title at the same event, but the different year, 2021. The time span between those 2 Grand Slam titles that has been won from the players that are born in the 90s are only 2 years. 1 year. 20, Dominic Thiem, 2020, Daniil Medvedev, 2021. 1 year. We have not seen any other players in the 90s winning any Grand Slam titles. Alright? Alright. If you compare what other eras has done, say players born in the 70s, players before the 80s, how many Grand Slam titles did those dudes win? 42 Grand Slam titles together they won. So the players born in the 80s, they won double as many Grand Slam titles more than the players that were born in the 70s. And of course, because of Djokovic, Nadal and Federer. It is not in rocket science to understand that scenario, why that happened. Because these three players is the greatest 3 tennis players of all time. And the special thing from this is that because they came at the same time. Yeah, Federer is a little older than both Djokovic and Nadal. He's 5 years older than Nadal. He's 6 years older than Djokovic. But they still competed at the same time, more or less. Just look at how many times they faced each other. Nadal and Federer, they faced each other 40 times. Federer and Djokovic, they faced each other 50 times. Djokovic and Nadal, they faced each other unbelievably 60 times. So they together have faced each other, if I'm counting right, here, in my head up here, 150 times. Oh, we have seen 150 matches between the big 3. 150 matches. We have been really spoiled. We have only one left man standing from that, the greatest tennis generation of all time, and that is Novak Djokovic. So, the players that are born in the 70s have won 42 Grand Slam titles together. And who are the players that are born in the 70s? You know it by now. The best tennis player from that generation is, of course, Pistol Pete Sampras, who won 14 Grand Slam titles. And then after him, it is Andre Agassi, who won 8 Grand Slam titles. Those are the 2 big superstars from that generation that are born in the 70s. So here you have it, players that are born in the 70s, they together won 42 Grand Slam titles. And the last player from that generation to win a Grand Slam title, if I'm not mistaken, was Agustín Gaudio back in 2004 when he won French Open. 20 years ago. I believe Agustín Gaudio is born in 1978. And of course, he's a one slam wonder. Alright, so there you have the 70s, what they have done. They have won 42 Grand Slam titles together. If you look at the 60s, players that are born in the 60s, and who are the players that are born in the 60s? It is Lendl, it is Wilander, Lendl who won 8 Grand Slam titles, Wilander who won 7 Grand Slam titles. We have Boris Becker there, who won 6 Grand Slam titles. We have Stefan Edberg there, who won 6 Grand Slam titles as well. The players that are born in the 60s, they managed to win 33 Grand Slam titles together. So, they won 9 less Grand Slam titles than the players that were born in the 70s. The players that were born in the 70s, they won 42 Grand Slam titles together. The players that was born in the 60s, they won 33 Grand Slam titles together. All right, there you have it. So obviously, it is pretty obvious here that players that are born in the 80s, they are much better than all the generations. All right, they are the so-called the golden generation, the greatest tennis generation of all time, and it depends, of course, mostly because of the big three. Like I said earlier in the video, the big three has been winning 82.5% of the Grand Slam titles that they were won from the players that were born in the 80s. 82.5%. And if Djokovic will be able to win one more, that number will be even higher. Let's see if Djokovic can win one more. So, when you consider all this, my tennis friends all around the world, and from 70s, I want to also mention Jim Courier. He was also a player that was born in the 70s. He from that generation, from Sampras and Agassi. Jim Courier, I believe he won 4 Grand Slam titles, if I'm not mistaken. So I forgot to mention a player like that also, because he won a bunch of majors. 4 is still a lot. Not many players who can win 4 Grand Slam titles, to say the least. So he was also from the bunch of players from the 70s, together with Sampras and Agassi. So, if you look at these players that are born in different eras and in different generations, every generation had superstars. If you look at the players that are born in the 50s, which are Connors, Borg, McEnroe, those were the superstars from that time. Borg, who won 11 Grand Slam titles, who was born in the 50s. Connors, who won 8 Grand Slam titles, who was born in the 50s. And John McEnroe, who won 7 Grand Slam titles, who was born in the 50s. And then the 60s, the superstar from the 60s is, of course, Wilander, Edberg, Becker, Lendl, that are born in the 60s. Those 4 players was the superstars from the 60s. From the 70s, the superstars were, of course, the biggest superstar was, of course, Pistol Pete Sampras with 14 Grand Slam titles, then Andre Agassi with 8, and then Jim Courier with 4. From the 80s, of course, we know who the biggest superstars are. It is Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal, the greatest 3 tennis players of all time. We have never seen 3 better tennis players than these 3 gigantic superstars, who together won 66 Grand Slam titles. So there you have the superstars from the 80s, all right? Who are the superstars from the 90s? Who are the superstars from the 90s? And we still have players who say, people who say, oh, the 90s are not say weak and this and that and that. They call Dominic Thiem. I see Dominic Thiem gets a lot of credit. Yeah, he should get a lot of credit. He played tough against the big 3. He had a 5-2 head-to-head record against Roger Federer. He was leading the head-to-head record against Federer. He played tough against Djokovic. He played tough against Nadal. He defeated Djokovic a lot of times. He defeated Nadal a lot of times. And he played the 7 Grand Slam finals, 4 Grand Slam finals. He won 1. So, and he had unbelievable power, both from forehand and backhand. Yeah. I know all about that stuff. But he was not super consistent. And I know he gets a lot of credit. If he would not have hurted his wrist, he would have won more majors. He would have been more competitive, etc. I speak with arguments, my television honor roll. I don't want to speak with bullshit. I speak with arguments. Yeah, he maybe would have won 1 more, maybe, but I'm not sure even about that. I will be across honest with you, my television honor world. I don't know if he would have won even one more if he would not have hurt himself. And you know why? I come with arguments. What did Dominic Thiem do after he won the US Open? He played the French Open. The French Open was played that pandemic year 2020 in autumn, in October. It was not played as usual because of the pandemic year. Hey, he didn't even make the second week, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't even make the second week that French Open year 2020. He just won the US Open. He just won his biggest title in his career, and he was healthy. He didn't even make the second week at that year's French Open 2020 as a new Grand Slam champion, just coming from the US Open when he won his biggest title of his career. Then, fast forward 2021 at Australian Open, he didn't make the second week there as well. If I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, he lost in the fourth round against Grigor Dimitrov at the Australian Open 2021. Dominic Thiem. Then, 2021, we continue. French Open, still Dominic Thiem was not injured. He lost at the first round at the French Open 2021. In the first round, he lost. So he plays 3 Grand Slam tournaments after he wins the US Open 2020, Dominic Thiem, and he doesn't make it to second week in none of them. In none of them. And we have people say if he would not have hurt his wrist, he would have won many more majors. He maybe would have won one more. I will not sit here and say that I know the answers, because I don't know. But I speak with arguments, and my arguments, my brain, my analyze is saying that Dominic Thiem, after he won his biggest title of his career, US Open 2020, he didn't go, and he played 3 more Grand Slam tournaments while being healthy, and he didn't make it to the second week in any of them. In any of them. And in one of them, he lost in the first round, French Open 2021. So, Dominic Thiem is a great player. He's a good player. I'm not saying that. But just because he played great against the big 3, Nadal, Djokovic and Federer, and like I said, against Federer, he even had a 5-2 head-to-head lead in the head-to-head meetings. He was leading Federer 5-2 in the head-to-head. Doesn't mean that he would have won many more majors if he was not hurted himself. No. And I just gave my arguments to that. Enough about that. What I want to say, period, you are getting my point. The players that are born in the 90s are the weakest generation of all time. All respect to Thiem, all respect to Medvedev, all respect to Casper Ruud, Kyrgios, Berrettini, all these Tsitsipas, all these players that Casper Ruud, Berrettini, Kyrgios, Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Thiem, all these 6 players that Djokovic defeated in Grand Slam finals the last 3-4 years and won 8 Grand Slam titles against them. They have done life very, very easy for Novak Djokovic. Djokovic has been benefited from this weak generation extremely much. If this weak generation was not this weak, I am completely convinced Djokovic would not have won 24 Grand Slam titles in his career. Federer didn't have this luxury. Federer didn't have this pleasure to facing the players that are born in the 90s so much. Why? Because he's young, he's older than them. Federer is born in the early 80s. Djokovic is born in the late 80s. Djokovic is born 1987. Federer is born 1981. I'm not saying Federer is a better player than Djokovic. That is not what I'm saying. This is not the point of the video. The point of the video is that the greatest tennis generation of all time was the player that was born in the 80s, and the worst tennis players and the worst tennis generation of all time is the players that are born in the 90s. Another argument I have is that when Federer faced some players that are born in the 90s, he defeated them majority of times. He defeated them. Federer has a 3-love head-to-head against Medvedev. Yeah, I know Medvedev was not the Medvedev that he became later on when Federer was defeating him those years. Anyway, he still defeated Medvedev. Out of 3 meetings that Federer faced Medvedev, he didn't lose one single time against him. Federer faced Berrettini 2 times, and he defeated Berrettini 2 of those occasions. Federer never lost against Berrettini. I don't think Federer even lost a set against Berrettini, if I'm mistaken. I don't think Federer ever lost a set in 2 meetings that Federer faced Berrettini. And then Federer faced once Casper Ruud, I think it was at French Open 2019, if I'm not mistaken. As 30, how old can Federer have been 2019? I believe he was 37 years old, yeah. As 37 years old, Federer, as 37 freaking years old, he was almost 38. He was almost 38. He defeats Casper Ruud, a 2 times French Open finalist later on in his career, in straight sets. That is the only meeting that Federer has. That is the only time Federer has faced Casper Ruud, a player that is born in the 90s. He defeats him as 37 years old, almost 38, 2 months away from being, not even 2 months, yeah, 2 months, 2 months away from being 38 years old. Federer defeats Casper Ruud in straight sets. Alright? And then we have Nick Kyrgios, so-called super talented player that people hype him so much. Yes, he's a talented player. He has great hands. He has great skills. But he will not win any majors for that. It is not enough only being talented to win the biggest tennis tournaments in the world. And what is the head-to-head between Federer and Nick Kyrgios? It is 6-1 in Federer's favor. 6-1. Federer had defeated Nick Kyrgios 6 freaking times, and Kyrgios has defeated Federer only 1 time. My point is, Federer, those times he didn't have much time to face the players that were born in the 90s, because Federer is much older than them, and because Federer is born early in the 80s, which is not the case with Djokovic, who is born late in the 80s. Federer was taking really good care of them. So Federer has competed majority of times against players that are born in the 80s. He has not competed so many times with players that are born in the 90s. And when he has competed against them, he has taken really good care of them. Why? Because the players that are born in the 90s are the absolute weakest tennis generation of all time. And the players that are born in the 80s, because Federer is himself born in the 80s, is the strongest tennis generation of all time. Yeah, we know that because of the big 3, Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal. But we have also Wawrinka there. We have also Andy Murray there. Wawrinka and Andy Murray have won together 6 Grand Slam titles. 2 players that are born in the 80s. And what is players that are born after the 90s? Players that are born in the 2000s. Alcaraz and Sinner. Alcaraz was born 2003. Sinner was born 2001. What is these 2 players doing against players that are born in the 90s? They're also demonstrating, showing, proving to us, to the entire world, that the players that are born in the 90s are the absolute weakest tennis generation of all time. Alcaraz is killing them, Sinner is killing them. So, my point is, we tennis fans, we tennis lovers around the world, I am guilty also. We have been criticizing Federer a lot. Oh, he's a weak Grand Slam champion. He's so weak Grand Slam champion. He has defeated only losers. He has won so many majors against weak players. Yeah, Safi, Hewitt, Roddick, Gonzalez, Baghdatis, Philippoussis. They were not the greatest tennis players of all time. And a decline Andrew Agassi also, where Federer defeated Andrew Agassi at the US Open 2005, where Agassi was 35 years old. Agassi was almost retired in that stage of his career. But Djokovic has benefited from the weakest tennis generation of all time when he has defeated these players that are born in the 90s so many times. He has benefited of this weakest tennis generation of all time so extremely much, and this should not be forgotten and denied, and we should really not close our eyes for this fact. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give us a thumbs up, subscribe, peace.